Soldier Soldier is a British television drama series. The title comes from a traditional song of the same name. Soldier, soldier, will you marry me, with your musket, fife and drum? An instrumental version of which was used as its theme music. Produced by Central Television and broadcast on the ITV network, it ran for a total of 7 series and 82 episodes from 1991 to 1997. It featured the daily lives of a group of soldiers in B Company, 1st Battalion the King's Fusiliers, a fictional British Army infantry regiment loosely based on the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers. Set in the immediate aftermath of the Cold War, it is a dramatisation of Army life in the early to mid-1990s, when the British Army was undergoing significant change. This is perhaps best demonstrated during the 3rd series, around 1994, when a significant number of real regiments were forced into amalgamations with each other due to downsizing of the army. In the world of Soldier Soldier, the King's Fusiliers are also forced to amalgamate with the Cumbrian Regiment, another fictional regiment, becoming the King's Own Fusiliers. At the time Soldier Soldier was broadcast, the fatality rate was low, with most casualties due to training accidents and suicides. The military as a whole was assigned to performing more peacekeeping missions than actually doing any fighting. As a consequence, the show served well to portray the army, despite the domestic problems that could occur, in a fairly good light. Although many well-known and not so well-known actors appeared in Soldier Soldier over the period it was broadcast, perhaps the best known are Robson Green and Jerome Flynn, who portrayed Fusilier Dave Tucker and Sergeant Paddy Garvey respectively. It was their performance of Unchained Melody in an episode of the series that propelled them to stardom, giving them several #1 songs and a best-selling album. Both actors left the series in 1995, following which viewing figures began to decline, leading to the series being cancelled in 1997. TV presenter Chris Kelly wrote and produced some episodes of the series. Regular cast Military personnel Robson Green as Fusilier Dave Tucker, Jerome Flynn as Lance Corporal Patrick Paddy Garvey, Gary Love as Corporal Anthony Tony Wilton, Holly Aird as Corporal Nancy Thorpe RMP, Miles Anderson as Lieutenant Colonel Dan Fortune, David Haig as Major Tom Cadman, Richard Hampton as Reverend Simon Armstrong CF Ratch D, Peter Wingfield as Lieutenant Nick Pascoe, Sean Baker as Company Sergeant Major Chick Henwood, Robert Glenister as Colour Sergeant Ian Anderson, Winston Crook as Fusilier Joe Meakin, Simon Donald as Major Bob Cochran, Leslie Vicarage as 2nd Lieutenant Kate Butler AGC, Angus McFadden as 2nd Lieutenant. Alex Pereira, Mos Hesse as Fusilier Michael Midnight Rawlings, Robert Gwalem as Lieutenant Colonel Nick Hammond, Adrian Rawlins as Major Tim Radley, Dorian Healy as Captain Kyron Voce, Rob Spendlove as Company Sergeant Major Michael Stubbs, Akim Mugaji as Fusilier Luke Roberts, John Bowe as Lieutenant Colonel Ian Jennings, John McGlynn as Major James McCudden, Ben Nealon as 2nd Lieutenant Jeremy Forsyth, David Groves as Fusilier Joe Farrell, Patterson Joseph as Fusilier Eddie Nelson, Duncan Bell as Lieutenant Colonel Paul Phillips, Dougray Scott as Major Rory Taylor, Sophie Dix as Captain Sadie Williams RAMC, Richard Dillon as Sergeant Brad Connor, Sean Dingwall as Lance Corporal Steve Evans, Simon Sherlock as Fusilier Mel Briggs, Danny Cunningham as Fusilier Andy Butcher, Philip Boyne as Lieutenant Colonel Mike Eastwood, James Corliss as Major Tim Forrester, Biddy Hodson as 2nd Lieutenant Samantha Sheridan AGC, Jonathan Guy Lewis as Sergeant Chris McLeod, Fiona Bell as Sergeant Angela McLeod AGC, Ian Curtis as Corporal Mark Hobbs, Kate O'Malley as Private Stacey Gray RLC, James Cosmo as Lieutenant Colonel Philip Drisdale, Lucy Kowu as Major Jessica Bailey AGC, Connor Mullen as Company Sergeant Major Alan Fitzpatrick, Thomas Craig as Fusilier Jacko Barton, Chris Gascoigne as Fusilier Tony Ross O'Hannesy as Corporal Dando PTI Instructor. Civilians Rosie Rowell as Donna Tucker, Annabelle Apson as Joy Wilton, Matthew Beard David Golivan Sonny Dudley Luke Burt as Matthew Wilton, Melanie Kilburn as Carol Anderson, Samantha Morton as Claire Anderson, Gareth Parrington as James Anderson, Catherine Harrison as Laura Cadman, Susan Franklin as Joliet Grant, Leslie Manville as Rachel Elliott, Suzanne Burden as Sandra Radley, Rocky Erla as Bernie Roberts, Denise Welch as Marcia Stubbs, William Ash as Jack Stubbs, Tara Simpson as Sarah Stubbs, Angela Clark as Colette Daly, Gabrielle Ridey as Isabel Jennings, Ellis Fernandez Milo Taylor as Macaulay Tucker, Nthati Moshesh as Lillian Malangi, Alison Skilbeck as Dr. Sarah Eastwood, Kate Ashfield as Kate Hobbs, Kelly Hunter as Jackie Reese, Laura Howard as Deborah Osborne, Joanna Phillips Lane as Karen Fitzpatrick, Liam Glebe as Kevin Fitzpatrick, Sarah Smart as Lucy Fitzpatrick, Michelle Butterley as Julie Aldroyd. Episodes: King's Own Fusiliers. The King's Own Fusiliers is the infantry regiment portrayed in the series. Like all Fusilier regiments, the King's Own Fusiliers wears a hackle in its headdress. This is colored dark blue over white. Initially, the regiment was called the King's Fusiliers. However, in the third season of Soldier, which took place during the Options for Change military reforms, the King's Fusiliers was forced to amalgamate with another regiment, the Cumbrians. Although attempts were made by the Cumbrians to keep the new regiment as an ordinary infantry regiment, rather than a Fusilier regiment, the regimental commander of the King's Fusiliers found in his research that, at some point during their history, the Cumbrians had served as Fusiliers. As a result, the new regiment was named the King's Own Fusiliers. The cap badge of the King's Own Fusiliers features the lion surmounting the crown, which is the recognized symbol of the British Army, within the band of the Order of the Garter. Surmounting the Garter band is the traditional flame that indicates a Fusilier regiment. The Royal Cumbrian Fusiliers wore the same cap badge and hackle as the King's Own Fusiliers. Regiment Role: as an ordinary infantry battalion, the King's Own Fusiliers was in the arms plot rotation, and thus participated in a number of different roles. 1st Battalion, King's Fusiliers, Light Infantry Battalion in the UK, Resident Infantry Battalion in Hong Kong. 1st Battalion, King's Own Fusiliers, Armoured Infantry Battalion with 4th Brigade in Germany, United Nations Peacekeepers with UNPROFOR in Bosnia, Public Duties Battalion in Windsor, Infantry Training Battalion Warminster, Air Assault Infantry Battalion with 5th Brigade. During its time in Windsor, in addition to other duties, the King's Own Fusiliers provided the guard at Buckingham Palace, the Tower of London and Windsor Castle. Recruiting area: as the King's Own Fusiliers has no geographical location in its name, it can only be speculated what recruiting area it represents. However, using options for change as a marker, it would be reasonable to assume that the regiment is from somewhere in the north of England, given that it is amalgamated with a regiment from Cumbria. In addition, the regiment's collar dogs are in the form of a stylized rose, suggesting the Red Rose of Lancashire. This suggests that the regiment is part of the King's Division. Despite this, the senior officers discuss the possibility of being amalgamated with other regiments from the Midlands. During Series 1, the possibility of merging or disbanding regiments is discussed, and at that point, the Cumbrians and the Rutlands are expected to be amalgamated to form the Northern Regiment. Commanding officers: 1st Battalion, King's Fusiliers, Lt Colonel D. Fortune, Lt Colonel N. Hammond. 1st Battalion, King's Own Fusiliers, Lt Colonel N. Hammond, Lt Colonel I. Jennings, Lt Colonel P. Phillips, Lt Colonel M. Eastwood, Lt Colonel P. Drisdale. Fictional regiments featured in Soldier, the King's Fusiliers, the Cumbrians, amalgamates with the King's Fusiliers. The Malvern Regiment, exercises with the King's Fusiliers during their time in Germany. See also, Redcap, Spearhead. References. External links: Soldier at the Internet Movie Database, Soldier at the Robson Green website. Soldier, Deliver Us from Evil with Jason O'Meara, Caps script.